Picture this. It's dawn in 13th century England. While you're probably thinking about your morning coffee, 7-year-old Thomas is already descending into a coal mine shaft, so narrow he has to crawl on his hands and knees. The darkness swallows him whole. Above ground, his mother won't see him again for 12 hours, if she sees him again at all. What you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about childhood in medieval times. This isn't just a story about hard work. This is about children facing dangers that would make grown adults today run screaming. And the most shocking part? Society didn't just allow it, they celebrated it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm diving deep into the darkest corners of history that textbooks won't tell you about. Today's episode might be the most disturbing one yet, but I promise you'll never look at childhood the same way again. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're about to journey into a world where being 7 years old meant you were already expected to risk your life for survival. Let me transport you to medieval Europe, roughly 1000 to 1500 CE. Forget everything Disney taught you about this era. There were no fairy godmothers protecting children, only harsh economic reality, and a society that viewed childhood as a luxury they couldn't afford. In the coal mines of England, children as young as 6 were strapped to coal carts like human mules. They called them trappers. Their job was to sit alone in pitch-black tunnels for up to 16 hours, opening and closing wooden doors to control airflow. Imagine that, a 6-year-old, sitting in complete darkness, surrounded by the groaning and creaking of an unstable mine, with only the occasional rat for company. But here's where it gets worse. And trust me, if you think that's bad, keep watching because we're just getting started. These children weren't just sitting in darkness. Cave-ins were common. Poisonous gases could kill without warning. And if a child fell asleep on the job, the consequences were often fatal, not just for them, but for the entire mining operation. Thomas, age 7, mining records from Yorkshire, 1347, died when tunnel collapsed, had been working 14-hour shifts for 8 months. Mother received no compensation. Now you might be thinking, surely the apprentice system protected children, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. The medieval apprentice system wasn't the quaint craftsman training we imagine today. It was legalized child labor wrapped in a pretty bow. Children as young as 7 were legally bound to masters for 7 to 10 years. And I mean bound. They couldn't leave, couldn't complain, and had virtually no rights. Let me tell you about Agnes, a real historical figure from 1380s London. At age 8, she was apprenticed to a cloth merchant. Her training involved carrying bolts of heavy fabric up 4 flights of stairs, working with dangerous dyes that burned her skin, and sleeping on the workshop floor. When she tried to run away, the law dragged her back. When she complained about the master's abuse, she was whipped publicly as an example to other apprentices. But here's the truly sinister part. Masters often worked their apprentices to death before they could complete their training. Why? Because dead apprentices didn't need to be paid journeyman wages. The system was designed to exploit children, not educate them. Before we go deeper into this nightmare, I want to hear from you. How old were you when you had your first real responsibility? Drop it in the comments below and compare that to these 7-year-olds facing life or death situations daily. Don't forget to hit that like button if this is already blowing your mind. The textile industry was particularly brutal. In the wool mills of Flanders, children were employed as scavengers, crawling under massive moving machinery to collect cotton fibers. These machines had no safety guards, no emergency stops. Children lost fingers, hands, entire arms. Many were crushed to death when they couldn't move fast enough. Medieval records from a Brussels textile mill, dated 1456, coldly document 3 children lost this month to the carding machines. Hiring more tomorrow. But let me tell you about the job that haunts me the most. The chimney sweeps. Master sweeps would buy children from desperate families, sometimes for as little as a loaf of bread. These children, called climbing boys, were forced up narrow, scorching hot chimneys that were often still smoldering from recent fires. Picture this. A 7-year-old boy, naked, except for a cloth around his waist, climbing up a chimney shaft, barely wider than his body. The walls are lined with sharp brick mortars that slice his skin. Above him, hot soot falls into his eyes and lungs. Below him, his master lights a small fire to encourage him to climb faster. Many got stuck and suffocated. Others developed what they called chimney sweep cancer. What we now know was scrotal cancer caused by constant exposure to carcinogenic soot. The youngest recorded victim was 9 years old. And society's response to these horrors? They praised the children for their industriousness. You might think farm work was safer than industrial labor. You'd be wrong again. Medieval farming was back-breaking, dangerous work, and children bore the brunt of the most hazardous tasks. They were sent into fields during harvest season to work alongside massive scythes and sickles. Accidents were so common that missing fingers were considered normal among peasant children. But the most disturbing job was bird scaring. Children as young as 5 were sent alone into fields from dawn to dusk, shouting and waving sticks to keep birds away from crops. This sounds harmless until you realize these children were exposed to the elements for 16 hours a day, with no shelter, food or water. Many died of exposure, heat stroke, or hypothermia. Winter farming was even deadlier. Children were sent to break ice on ponds and streams so animals could drink, often falling through and drowning. They guided plows through frozen fields, losing toes and fingers to frostbite regularly. Here's what's truly chilling about medieval child labor. It wasn't seen as abuse, it was seen as moral education. Medieval society believed that children were born sinful and needed to have laziness beaten out of them through hard work. The church actively preached that child labor was God's will. St. Thomas Aquinas himself wrote that children who didn't work were destined for eternal damnation. Parents weren't monsters. They were trapped in a system where child labor meant survival. A working 7-year-old could mean the difference between the family eating or starving. But this economic desperation created a horrific cycle where childhood simply didn't exist for the poor. Now I need to address something important. Not all medieval children worked in these conditions. Noble children lived completely different lives, learning to read, write, hunt, and manage estates. This class divide was so extreme it was like 2 different species of childhood existing simultaneously. But even among the wealthy, children faced their own dangers. Noble children were often married off at 7 or 8 years old to seal political alliances. They were sent away from home to serve in other noble households, essentially as well-dressed servants. And boys as young as 10 were expected to train for warfare, facing real combat by their early teens. Here's something that might surprise you. Children did fight back. Historical records show numerous instances of apprentice rebellions, child strikes, and even organized resistance movements. In 1381, during the English Peasants' Revolt, children played crucial roles as messengers and scouts. Some of the most passionate speeches against the feudal system came from teenagers who had endured years of brutal labor. But these rebellions were often crushed violently. The punishment for a child who refused to work was often death, a reminder that in medieval times, children were considered property, not people. Change came gradually and unevenly. The Black Death of the 14th century actually improved conditions for surviving children. Suddenly, labor was scarce, and workers had more bargaining power. Some of the first child labor laws appeared in Italian city-states during the Renaissance, but they were weak and rarely enforced. The real change didn't come until much later, and even then, it took centuries for society to fully recognize that childhood deserved protection, not exploitation. So the next time you hear someone say kids today have it too easy, remember Thomas in the coal mine. Remember Agnes in the textile shop. Remember the nameless climbing boys who suffocated in chimneys for a few coins. These children weren't statistics. They were real people with dreams, fears, and an incredible will to survive in a world that saw them as expendable tools. Their suffering built the foundations of the economic systems that would eventually lead to our modern world. But here's the question that should keep you up at night. While we've made progress in Western societies, child labor still exists today. Right now, as you watch this video, there are children in mines, factories, and fields facing dangers similar to what we've discussed. History isn't just about the past. It's a warning about what happens when society values profit over protection, when economic desperation overrides human compassion. This has been one of the most difficult episodes I've ever researched, but I believe these stories need to be told. If this opened your eyes to a part of history you never knew about, please hit that like button and share this video. What shocked you most about medieval child labor? What parallels do you see with today's world? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and often feature your thoughts in future episodes. And if you want to dive deeper into the dark side of history, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Next week, I'm investigating something even more disturbing, the true story behind medieval medicine and why going to a doctor was often a death sentence. Until then, remember, the children of the past are counting on us to learn from their suffering and do better. Don't let their stories be forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we uncover more hidden truths from history's darkest chapters.